night.
Sorry, AT, it's wild.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I definitely cut you off on that. And that's why we're on episode 0 of Echoes, a sumo podcast. Nathan, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Nathan. I'm one of the Honu Sumo Club members. I use he, him pronouns. And I am one of the participants in this Echoes Sumo History Podcast. And I'm right now one of the main researchers, but I have a lot of collaborators I'm working with on this too. And then we'll get into other introductions and the story of why we're doing this. AT or JJ? Hi. Who wants to go next?
AT, you can go.
Okay, hi, I'm AT Furuya. I use they, them pronouns. I'm Yonsei. I'm 4th generation Japanese American here in San Diego, California. And I'm also on the board of the Japanese American Historical Society, and I work at a nonprofit called Athlete Ally that focuses on inclusion in sport. And Japanese American history in San Diego is my area of expertise in history. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Christina, pronounce she, her, hers. I'm a Honu Sumo co-founder and just admirer of all the organizing and power building that AT does. And life partner to JJ. I love you, JJ. You go next.
Thank you. We should have added in popcorning to the next person. I feel like that would have cleaned that up a little bit. I realized that now.
Episode 0.
Hey,
episode 0.
That's what it's about. I am JJ. He, him pronouns. I am the one of the co-founders of Honu Sumo, and a professional foot and mouther. As one does. And I will go ahead and popcorn to Mr. Jake.
I'm Jake. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of the guys that runs Grand Sumo Breakdown, another sumo podcast. And I am blissfully unaware of most of what we're covering here. So I'm very excited for that. I've been watching pro sumo and amateur sumo for a while now. Do as much media coverage as I possibly have time for. But I'm super excited about this because the history beyond more than 20 years ago, total blind spot for me. Super excited to hear what we've dug up.
All right. So yeah, let's let me see. How do I do this? I should have figured this out ahead of time.
You got it, JJ. You present. Oh,
boom. Hey, look at that.
Go.
You don't need that man, JJ. Yeah.
Man, this guy's killing it, isn't he?
Hey, so as you can see, this is episode 0. Why? And I left the subtitle in it. Put in your mouth. Ellipsis. Yes. Once again, I think I was born doing yoga and my foot just stays promptly in my mouth. So that's just where I'm at. We started our club back in 2019, or not 2019. I can read. It's June 19th, 2021.
Yeah, read the slide, JJ. Just read the slide. You'll be okay.
You would think that the guy that put together the slide wouldn't have an issue with this, but maybe I'm a little nervous, right? Maybe
read the slide first, then get fancy.
I need y'all to stop coming for JJ. Okay?
Hey, you know what?
coming for change.
I spent too much time with Mencken. I gotta
You
fill
did.
Menken's
You
role here and
definitely
give
spent
JJ
too much
some credit.
time with Mencken. But yeah, we went to the nationals, and at that moment we started the club. It was literally when this photo was taken. That's when our sumo club started. I left the timestamp for a reason. The photo was awesome for this because it gave me exactly what I needed. It's all the way down to the second, which for some reason really mattered to me to put into the slide. And it started with just us three. This is before we even thought about doing a sumo tournament. Before, before Mencken lost all of the matches that he participated in, right? It was a big moment. It was a big moment.
Can I actually interject there? That was for me too. That was my that was the first amateur sumo event that I'd ever been to. And it honestly, it was the men's lightweight division, Mencken versus one of the wrestlers from Texas, Chad, out of Dark Circle. That specific match was when I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. I got to cover amateur sumo too, not just pro sumo anymore.
Okay.
And yeah, that nationals in Austin, Texas was a huge moment for amateur sumo in general. I think there's a lot of people who could trace back to a pretty similar timestamp for when they really got into sumo. So that's cool to see that was the official genesis for your sumo club.
Yeah, we were trading a little bit before that, but we weren't a club. We were just it was just really me and Mencken in a COVID bubble doing Shikos together, and me trying to never let him win after he beat me at the US Open. So, I am petty, and I'm okay with that. I live within it. I own up to it. And from there, we started doing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh yeah. Can you go back too?
Of course.
Is my mic up enough? What's happening?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, you're okay. All right. So also, this is significant, right? It's June 19th. This is Juneteenth, and we're in Texas, the last state that enslaved Africans found out that slavery had been over. And that's why we celebrate Juneteenth. It happened 5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So the whole country was free. And it was still Black people in this state of Texas that did not know that liberation had come. And this being a tournament put on by, Justin, a Black sumo wrestler who really, encourage, if you haven't seen Black in Sumo, make sure y'all watch that. But it really was a encouraging person for me and JJ participating in sumo. And I knew that coming to a tournament like this, I think Arrows made these bags that were had the red, black, and green flag on it. I was like, oh yeah. I said, oh yeah. I'm gonna when it's my turn to do a tournament, this is the community that you can be all of yourself in and do. So I was pretty happy.
Yeah, and I think that this was also one of those tournaments where a lot of us in the sumo community started framing our tournaments off of, because again, we didn't really have much of a reference on what came before. And Justin had like a really good idea of bringing in the Japanese community. He's married to a Japanese woman, but it's also like the Kendo Club was there, the Austin Kendo Club, the Sister City Society, like all of the things that we're kind of doing now, he was already established in doing, which really just kind of solidifies that that unity. And it's a magical day for multiple different reasons, right? And then from there, after our club started, we started having regular practices. I have a big shout out here for Kellyanne. Kellyanne's been rocking with us since the moment I yelled out to Christina and I went, "Ura, ura," and she did a ashitori, picked up Kellyanne's leg and threw her. From that moment on, I think Kelly hated me a little bit, but then from there, she really started to like mesh with us. And that's one of my favorite things about sumo is really it is a you win and you lose. You learn from your losses, and your losses are like, 2 seconds, and you're like, well, that's what I'm just living with for quite some time, right? So yeah, Kellyanne, always got to add her in. And then we get to the SoCal Open, the 2023 SoCal Open. We had, I think, if I remember correctly, we had about 30 competitors that did multiple divisions. So it kind of fluffed up our numbers a little bit. But, we had different weight classes, a kids division, women's, men's. We had as many categories as we could do at that time before we were able to really like get creative with things and kind of expand our horizons. But man, this was a moment. And during that moment, JJ definitely stood up there and put his foot right in his mouth as I announced that this was the first sumo tournament in San Diego, right? And I really want to popcorn over to Christina for a second, just to first of all, she's in this great picture with Kellyanne and them, but I just want you to talk about that situation a little bit.
Yeah, so also giving it up to our people behind the scenes. Shout out to AT, who was there holding it down on the internet. And Naisha was there, and also Victoria, one of our jujitsu peeps. So yeah, we were like like, hey, are we the first tournament, kind of ever to happen? And we both were like, oh yeah, we are the first tournament, in San Diego. And something I appreciate so much, like AT was also just like, y'all, like AT is like the best, most competitive coach. AT coach vibe. AT was like, Christina, where are the students to wash the windows? And I said, AT, it's fine. I said, I'll do it. AT was like, no, you won't. And I saw AT over there.
I remember, yeah. I was like,
AT was like cleaning the windows. And
I grew up in a different dojo. Like, kids are running around, like, who's doing what?
And it was like in those conversations when we when AT, and also like if y'all don't know AT, to be somebody who's filled with so much knowledge and so much just so much of all the really good shit you need to make it through life. They are so low key and so like humble. So it was just so sweet. AT was like, like starting to watch the windows a little bit and was like hipping me and JJ to like, do y'all know that, there were sumo tournaments before? And AT was like,
such a polite buzzkill.
It was so amazing. AT was like, oh no. But like that Black people put on, that's a first. So you can claim that one. And then me and JJ were like, we'll take it. But it also just really bust open our world to the amazing historical, just everything. And we didn't know that we could get even more of appreciation and love with sumo than we could, and then that love was deepened after AT. So AT, if you could talk a little bit about dropping that information and also about the history of sumo in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, also jump in with questions to kind of guide because I will go off on tangents. But
As will we all.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was in grad school about 15 years ago. I was doing work in the Japanese American Historical Society, and a lot of my cataloging was um activities that Issei and Nisei, that's first generation Japanese immigrants from Japan. We refer to them as Issei. And then Nisei, which is Japanese Americans that were born in the United States. A lot of the activities before World War II. And so that's the only reason why I knew about sumo in San Diego to begin with, because none of my family, like I don't have that in any of my photos, my family history. My grandparents never talked about it. And my mom was born post World War II, so they were not doing sumo. It was not as popular as it was pre World War II. So that's kind of how I knew about the history, or that there had been and a lot of that was history that Don Estes and Susan Hasegawa, who's a professor at City College, they did a lot of background and work on that. So that's how I knew. And a lot of the history that I got from San Diego was through the archives.
Yeah, and
Nice.
it was really AT for us, because like SoCal Open, it's a tournament that we always have at the end of the end of February to mark Black History Month, and for that also to have been around the time that is marked as a day of remembrance for the Japanese community, and us being a group that loves history and knows that the keys to belonging and repair is honoring the times that we've harmed each other or been harmed. That was so great for us, and such an amazing gift.
And then speaking of history, these were the first two photos that I saw. Right, like I think 18 might have shared one of these or both of these with me, and just like a short Google, you can find these two when you do California sumo and anything brief before World War II or during World War II, right? You can kind of find this out, which these just reshaped everything. I would really enjoy Nathan, if you can speak about these two photos.
Yeah, so these are well, I'll go back just a little bit. When I joined the sumo club during one of the earliest kind of Keiko sessions and kind of club business and talking about the upcoming tournament, JJ and Christina mentioned this kind of the foot and mouth experience and how AT kind of schooled them on the history of sumo. And so afterwards I was like, oh yeah, there must have been pre-war sumo, because I'm a big history nerd. And so these are some of the first pictures I saw too. And so it piqued my curiosity too. And also just kind of, hearing like, having the foot and mouth experience, but from that, kind of piquing curiosity and wanting to kind of, instead of getting defensive and doubling down on the mistake, instead it was doubling down on the curiosity, and that's like, hey, this is my tribe. These are my people. Like if they get curious from this kind of thing. So the picture on the left is, I believe, from the Gila River concentration camp in Arizona. So during World War II. And it's in the National Archives. It's a picture there. And the picture on the right is from the Santa Anita Assembly Center. So it was the Santa Anita racetrack was turned into an assembly center where when Japanese Americans were removed from their homes and told to report, that's where they first went. And then from there, they were kind of, sorted and sent to concentration camps kind of all over the country, from Arizona to Colorado to two in California and two in Arkansas, and so that was at that assembly center. And then, right away you see this, there's a crowd, there's wrestlers, there's mawashi, and right away you're like, that was a thing. I mean, there's a whole gyoji uniform, right? And a gumbai. So like, this must have been a rich ongoing thing before. So, that got me curious, and but I didn't really start doing the research in earnest for a few months until something got me like digging deeper. But we can get back to that part. But like these pictures right away, like you can see them and you're like, hey, wow, there was sumo in concentration camps in America, but that means there was a lot more, right?
Yeah, and it made so much sense why, a lot of us who start sumo, right, are like, oh, I don't understand. This should be like so much more popular. And then you're like, oh shit. When people got out of the concentration camps, like it was illegal to be Japanese. It was illegal to practice, and it made so much sense.
Just an anecdote. If you've been to San Diego in Balboa Park, which I think we need to rename, there was the Japanese tea pavilion, and when Japanese Americans were incarcerated, they changed it into an officers' building, and in the Union Tribune, they even say like, we have to get rid of these like Jap crackers. And it was like all the food in the pavilion, like we need to replace it with good old American chips. And so they like raided out the tea pavilion and took it over, and then like Americanified it. So there, it's interesting. Yeah, like just the history on what happened to. I mean, this was my grandparents. My grandparents were put in the Poston, which is where most San Diegans went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have one more photo that Nathan. This is one that I didn't see when I did my surface of research, but I think it was a big one that you were able to find.
Oh yeah, this is Toshuzan. So and somebody had like I think JJ or Christina, you mentioned that when AT had told you about sumo, and then you just mentioned something like there used to be like yokozuna in America. We're like, what? And going further into the research, Toshuzan wrestled out of Northern California and was the yokozuna for Northern California. He unfortunately died about a year after this picture was taken. He died young. And the other thing, just as a legacy thing, we'll get to this later, is his mawashi that was gifted to him from his kind of a prefectural kind of association, the Kenjinkai. So like people from that prefecture association. You'll see this kesho mawashi on somebody else 10 years later, so it became kind of like club property of the Northern California Sumo Association and got passed down as kind of a legacy, his kesho mawashi. So it's something that you see come back, and so there's this vibrant, like there were institutions, there were tournaments, there was like a whole community around this that existed pre-World War II. And so that's the thing that I got really like kind of curious about is what was this kind of community sumo, community life like pre-World War II, and then of course that inevitably leads to like, why did it stop, right? And that's a sad story. I mean, it has a lot of stories of resilience and everything too, but it did stop. After World War II, with a few exceptions. And that's been an interesting thing to find, is there was some continuity. But yeah, Toshizan, and his family donated these pictures to the Japanese American National Museum in the 90s, decades later. So there are more pictures that I'm trying to get access to. So yeah, there's just so much more to find out.
Sumo pre-World War II, a lot of the Japanese activities, whether it was theater or dance, something like sumo, there was a period of time where Japanese people could not immigrate to the US, right? So we have the alien land laws. They couldn't purchase land. They couldn't lease. They could only lease it for like 3 months. The gentleman's agreement. So then, like, my grandma was a picture bride, my grandma Kobayashi. So it was an arranged marriage. The U.S. had cut off Japanese men laborers from coming over, but the Japanese women could still come over. So that could only happen if they were married. So they would get married, and then, like, my great grandfather met my great grandma when she got off the boat. And it was not, I guess, romantic. Although they had like 12 kids later, so I'm like, it must have worked out. I don't know.
They figured it out.
They
figured something
out. There was no Netflix. Okay.
They just chilled.
Just chill, yeah.
Grandpa was bored. They said, "Damn that radio."
That's the thing. Before you had TV, I mean, there's not as many things to do, right?
That's true. So the Issei were the ones who were driving a lot of the cultural pieces, right? So the Japanese Association, a lot of unions or associations were forming. So for gardeners, for fishermen, for agriculture workers, a lot of the areas that Japanese people were working. And that's where part of the entertainment was to bring them together to teach their kids some of the culture. And so the Nisei kids weren't driving sumo tournaments. It was the Issei. When they were incarcerated, there was a complete flip of power dynamics between the Issei and the Nisei, where Issei were not allowed to hold jobs. Only the Nisei could. So their kids were the ones bringing in the money. And these are like, 18 to 30-year-olds the most, who are now the providers for the family. Which caused, a lot of mental health problems for the first generation men and women. And if they're already feeling displaced and not able to have any, say or control or leadership in anything, then the Nisei were like, we need to assimilate. Like we've got to figure out we're Americans. That already started happening before World War II. We have to prove our loyalty, prove that we're Americans. So ditching sumo after World War II, who would have been the ones to carry on that torch? It would have been the Nisei, who were in that kind of conflict of, and then my mom's generation, the Sansei or third generation, they lost language by that time. They didn't even learn Japanese. So I think that's part of how sumo just did not kind of come back after World War II, which I don't know if I just I hope I didn't like spoil.
You're perfect.
No.
Well, that's a wrap. We kind of covered everything.
All right.
Episode 0, the only episode
that's only one. And like AT, like you lifting up, like anytime, like when we went to Manzanar, right? And we went on the Manzanar pilgrimage, me, JJ, Nate, and shout out to Nikkei Progressives, good looking out.
Yeah.
When we went it's just like I get so, and I'm finding the words, but I just get so sad for our people who have been like victims of white supremacy and that violence, because when we talk about repair and reparations that the Japanese community is still getting, because I think a lot of people have they think, oh, reparations has happened. No, it's still fighting for real reparations. And reparations for Black folks here. Like when you talk about going through something so traumatic that it's dangerous to teach any part, it just speaks so much to like the and then for the people to blame ourselves or not feel Black enough or not feel Japanese enough because we don't know these things. But to really hear the history and hear what was being done to folks, it was like, if I teach you this, they'll take you again. Like that is just, it's just like, it's just a reflection, but it just really speaks to how lasting harm and state sanctioned harm is, and how important it is that that we learn about it and we talk about it, and so that we can push back against ways of it veering its head now. A lot of the things that we hear used to describe immigrants, incarcerated people, trans folks, queer folks, poor folks, the eating the dogs, all types of stuff like that. Like these are things that come from a playbook that
Right.
Yeah. So it was like,
Yeah.
and Jay and I, we were very much like, being in the barracks and thinking about when we were at the museums, for like the Underground Railroad and stuff, and you would see the lodging for enslaved people. It's just like you in the bathrooms, right? You don't have your own space. Like man, like AT, I was like, the toilets were so close together, and then I was just like there was no humanity here, but the humanity brought by the folks who were incarcerated. And when I see pictures of like sumo and other things happening, it really just reminds me of it. It reminds me of like the seeds, me and Jay's ancestors, right, hid in their hair to be able to grow food. So just that resilient spirit. Yeah. Just that reflection.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some really hard topics to cover, that in covering the history of sumo is something that's so tied culturally. Like if somebody in a country on the other side of the world started playing American football or something like that, like the quintessential American sport, it wouldn't really be the same thing here. But sumo is something that goes back far enough, like 10 times as long as the United States has even been a country. Something that goes so deep into the culture, it's so entwined in like the history of our government's decisions during World War II are going to be incredibly entwined with this first section of sumo history here that we're going to be covering, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's
and I think AT,
go ahead, Nathan.
Well, and I think what AT kind of called back to is that during some of those early episodes too, when we kind of talk about the foundations of when sumo started in America, it directly does go back to the gentleman's agreement in like 1907, 1908, and then that kind of picture bride period, but where like the Issei were trying to figure out like how do we navigate all the new alien land laws coming into effect. And then in 1924 there was this basically just poof, the gate was shut, and that really creates quick, this like,
real quick. One of the roles we've joked that I am going to try to fill here is the audience stand-in. Can you give me the 30-second version, like just the complete super top level view of what is the gentleman's agreement and the alien land law? Because those are not two things I know off the top of my head. So I
Okay.
assume that people listening will probably, at least some, will feel the same.
Well, and AT, you probably know this better or as well as I do too.
Yeah,
So,
I have like a Midwestern suburban, like
Yeah.
rough
That's
education
all right,
here.
Jake.
So
We're going to be radicalizing everybody.
Trust me, you don't have to work too hard to do that. But I am curious about the specifics of the history. That's the stuff I don't know.
So basically, around 1900, actually from like the 1880s onward, there was this like intensifying like yellow peril of like Chinese and then Japanese kind of workers coming to America and working. And it just kept kind of intensifying. And it really picked up after the Russo-Japanese War, when Japan just trounced Russia during the Russo-Japanese War.
Yeah, that was like the first time that a non-white European power had beaten a white European power, and white people freaked out about it.
Yes, they absolutely freaked out.
Yeah.
And so then there was this increasing, like it gets complicated, like it's really complicated, but there were increasing restrictions on immigration of especially men coming to America. But there was some like
non-white men coming.
Using all these like convoluted proportional sorts of things that basically just make it like, if you're a white man from Western Europe, you can come. And so, so those restrictions kept intensifying. And what happened is a lot of states imposed laws restricting land ownership or certain trades or professions or licenses. But the biggest impact one was California's alien land law. And it said basically a person ineligible for citizenship, code for, an immigrant from, countries where you're not allowed to get citizenship. So that was the big impact of that, like, of these early laws, is the ineligibility to become a naturalized citizen. So if you're ineligible to become a citizen, you can't own land. And
basically, can I just say, like,
go ahead.
Stop me if you've heard this before. The rhetoric was they're taking our jobs.
This sounds a little familiar.
Sounds real familiar.
I watched a documentary that aired when I was in high school about that. It was, I believe, on Comedy Central, South Park. I don't know if you guys have heard of this documentary series, but yeah.
Taking our jobs.
No, yes, I appreciate you bringing that up. That rhetoric is from time immemorial. That has been around forever.
Yeah. And so in California, especially, that was that those restrictions on you can't own land, you could only lease it for X amount of time, things like that. But what happened in 1924 was there was just basically a complete shutting of Japanese immigration to the US. And then when that happened, there was like a big identity crisis of then what's our future in America? And there were a lot of Issei who left America, went back to Japan. Some Issei went to other parts of the world to kind of start new life. They like liquidated all their capital and they left, and so there was this big identity crisis. And one of the things that like was an evolving thing that settled into is, well, then for the people who stayed was the hope is the Nisei. Nisei are US citizens. They'll be able to own land and then be able to, be successful and build a life in America. It'll be different for them. Hopefully.
Well, it wasn't even just that they could. They actually started purchasing land in the name of their babies.
Yes.
Which other non-white immigrants who were also bound by these bans did too.
Right. And then inevitably, then people like find a place to carve out a life for themselves and communities. And like when you're restricted, people find, how do I make it? And so what happened was, then there's this like constant, and this is like the frustrating thing from like reading newspapers from the 20s and 30s, which I've been doing a lot of the last few months, is this like constant like white supremacist catch-22 of, we're going to restrict you into this area. You can only do this. And then people start figuring out a way to navigate that and prospering within that sphere.
Not like that.
But not like that.
Not like that way.
Oh, no. Hold on.
Why do you have a monopoly on celery? And like getting mad about it, and this like resentment. And then, it seems ridiculous. Like, but then, when Issei had to keep a foot in Japan, they were ineligible for U.S. citizenship. They had to keep a connection to Japan. They weren't allowed to become fully American, right? And then how dare you be so Japanese, And so there's this thing after thing that you see happening in that period. And and in retrospect, we can see how that then culminates during World War II. But at the time, people were just trying to figure out a place and carve out a future for themselves and their families,
Yeah.
I get worked up about this.
I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, I appreciate the context. I think it's, as mentioned, I want to try and make sure that one of the things I notice on my own podcast is I often get like impenetrably deep in the vocab. It's intimidating for newcomers, right? So I want to help. If I don't know a term, I'm assuming that it means that a lot of other listeners might not know that term. So yeah, I just appreciate. I'll just hop in and ask for some context if need be. But I think that's like the 101 level view of like the situation that we kind of need in order to even begin to talk about sumo. Like we need to talk about like, what does it mean to be Japanese in America at this time before we can talk about what is the context of the Japanese sport at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
I'm going to add in one more picture from the slideshow. And this was a magical moment that I feel like it took us way too long to get here, especially since it's right down the street from my gym. I don't understand what happened. Is literally not even a block down the street. It's the next light over. But there's a full like cultural society that I just had no concept of. But at this time, again, I'm really big into the timestamp because it means a lot to me. This was a magical moment.
I love your pants, by the way. These are
thank you.
Oh God, yeah,
they're amazing.
They're amazing.
I'm doing loud pants now, and
the pants are on point every day.
Yes. Sometimes it triggers people, and if it does, it makes me happy also.
It triggers me in the sense that I need to find that somewhere.
Oh, nice. I like that. But this meeting, Christina, can you speak a little bit about this meeting and your feelings?
So first off, oh my gosh, I had a chance to get I got an email from because Jay and I are a part of like still part of like the email group from the 2024 Manzanar pilgrimage. Also, me and Jay were on the pilgrimage, and we were like, oh, so this is just something our family is going to do every year, like always, So I got connected to Kay, got their phone number, and I was like, so I stepped out of coffee with JJ to call Kay, and Kay and I stayed on the phone for almost an hour. Needless to say, my coffee got cold. That was waiting for me inside.
It became an iced coffee.
Yes, thank goodness that JJ is an iPad trained adult, because he just put on his little headphones and he was on his iPad.
He's old enough that he can entertain himself for a little bit, right?
That's how he types?
Thank you. It's a cat situation.
So good.
As a hunt and pecker, I feel attacked right now.
Jay, I sent you a questionnaire just to attack you in that moment. So thank you. So we talked about so many things, right? We're both San Diego folks who had a chance to live in LA and, be in LA and be really just, it was in LA where, because one of the hotels that I was supporting the organizing for a union in was the DoubleTree in Little Tokyo, and that had a long history of being called the Double Tani. And so basically my job was to be outside the hotel. One time I dressed up as a bed bug, and I had I had my bullhorn on, and people would open. People were like, "Why is there a bug down there?" It was.
I'm gonna need to see photos. This is
Yeah, no
amazing.
kidding.
I've
That's
got to
funny.
find the photos. And
As somebody who has
JJ
found a bed bug in his hotel room before,
Ah,
this is really close to my heart, and I'm feeling a
Oh.
little emotionally vulnerable.
please be vulnerable. Also, if y'all want somebody to watch your picket line and to stare down hotel security of anti-union hotels, you want JJ there, because he gives a good side eye. So anyways, Kay and I become fast friends, and then I fall even deeper love with her when so at the historical society, y'all, there's a like a little diorama of the Sun Cafe. So y'all, in San Diego, I was raised, my mom's salon was around the corner from the Sun Cafe. And I remember being little, we would get the like bacon, egg, and cheese on, 2 pieces of bread. But that was where I was like first introduced to what happened to the Japanese community in San Diego, because in the Sun Cafe they had all these pictures, and then like little descriptions of what happened. And I would ask, okay, so why did an apology have to happen? And then the folks at the Sun Cafe would talk to me about it. And y'all, I couldn't have been older than like 9 years old.
Wow.
Just this little kid, this little Black girl going around and picking up food for the salon. So, talking to Kay about that, and yeah, it just was, fast forever friends at first sight. And I want JJ and Nathan to kind of share, because Nathan totally, he totally just nerded out so hard
That's
about
amazing. That's so great.
And I definitely got into an amazing conversation with one of the, I think, other historians there about my critique of people who are in charge of recording history, because in the 20s, it was like the last generation of people who had been enslaved, and the people who recorded these Black people, who had thick accents, but also, African American vernacular English. It is a language with words that mean things. Fortunately, the people recording were folks who did not know the language and did a terrible job, like writing down what these Black folks were saying. So it's stories of like, people who were like 5 years old, who remembered what their mom looked and smelled like, but they were moved to another plantation, and all that was lost because the person recording that didn't see that story as valuable, or didn't see that person as valuable. So it's just a treasure trove of amazingness. Yeah. But I'll pass to JJ and Nathan so they can kind of talk a little bit about.
Real quick on that topic, is something that I try to pay attention to in my own coverage of sumo. Sumo in particular that's just my niche, all different versions of it. And I think this podcast, as well as the stuff that I do on my own, I try to keep in mind that like 50 years from now, maybe some other group of young dorks like us will be the ones coming to me looking for information, right?
Hell yeah.
Because like on this show in particular, we've got a handful of people that are some of the most diligent, like I don't know, we don't look at it like this right now, but the stuff that we put on YouTube for just fun for ourselves, that is the history. We are kind of writing that history. Yep. So I think it's an important obligation that we have to keep in mind when, if I'm putting out a sumo newsletter, or if you guys are doing a Why Sumo episode on your YouTube channel of talking to somebody you haven't talked to before, like that's something that I can't imagine too many people really keep in mind when they're keeping records like that, but it's something that if you do keep in mind, I think can help you be a better resource for the future.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think I appreciate you covering that, like as record keepers, you have a responsibility to cover everything you can, but also like not just for your own fun, but like what if somebody is looking for a resource and they stumble on you, and that's the thing, you gotta, that's their resource, that's their 100-year-old photo that they found in the National Archives, right? So we gotta do the best we can to do the job right. And I mean, of course, I think we're off to a good start, but it's definitely something I keep in mind when I talk about sumo.
Yeah.
And Jake, hats off to you too, because like, I think about when the youngins do find what we put out there, in your content, it's not without the presence of women and queer people in sumo.
Oh God,
because that's a like and JJ and I are always like, okay, who's gonna be whose photo needs to be on this, because
sure.
I mean, oh my God, what in 21, 25, the youngins are looking through stuff and they were like, yeah, it was only guys doing sumo.
Well, I think maybe we save this discussion for later, but like the stuff that we do about sumo right now is, I think we're all doing a good job. And it is, anybody who's studying this era of sumo will notice, I gotta say it, sumo is like really gay right now, and it's awesome. It's like it's so accepting. It's a niche for all sorts of people to feel accepted, right?
Yeah.
And
like, we don't play games.
Absolutely.
That emphasis on like inclusion and belonging is like really strong.
Yeah,
and one of the other things that I'm like, this is my tribe. Like this is cool.
To tie it back into what we're covering now, that's very obviously like, I don't know what word I would use. I don't want to say coincidence or anything like that. It happens to be a niche that a lot of people can find friends, find home, find acceptance in. But like pre-World War II sumo, it was almost the opposite. It was like trying to distill those things where the people around you don't see that, right? Or if you're in an island where it's just you and several other people from your community, this is you trying to distill that culture. And I think that contrast is really interesting. I'm super excited to learn more of the specifics as we dive deeper into the history of it. But it's interesting to me. I think that aspect of modern sumo, modern American amateur sumo, is a totally new thing. It has almost nothing to do with the original history.
I think that we won't really know because people couldn't be open back then.
That's a good point.
So we can't really say what people were or were not. That is not, we're not going to get that from photos. We're not going to get that from books. Those, unfortunately, those will probably be lost to time.
Sure.
But that's we just can't. But what we can do is, which kind of circles back to our meeting with Kay, is focus in on the bonding of people, which Kay emphasized that with the restaurant across the street, where she brought persimmons for not just them. She brought persimmons dried for us, and most people don't know I love persimmons. So and dried persimmons is like my favorite thing. Dried persimmons and dried mango is like my catnip. And I was there, I was vibing, and I was just feeling like I was a part of the community. Mind you, it's literally in my neighborhood, but I just, you just don't know what you don't know. But I think that's always going to be the case. We don't know what we don't know.
And
go ahead.
Can I just say though, like with sumo, like we can't know. I mean, there were queer people doing sumo back then, right? Like queer people, trans people have existed throughout time, but
In sumo, like, and I'm not an expert on sumo, but from what I do know is women were not allowed in Japan to do sumo, and in the Shinto ritual, Japanese or women weren't allowed to step foot on the mat, right? So to do sumo in the US, I think of like kind of what will the evolution of this look like. And while we can't for sure say, that it would be XYZ and, pre-World War II in the US, I think based on American culture and gender roles, that it's safe to say that like women generally wouldn't be in those like competitions, especially, going against men. But what I love about sumo today, and why I was like, this is so weird. I've never seen non-Japanese people do sumo, really. Like, that's a culture shock for me. But when Christina's like, AT, we're doing sumo, you should come. And I was like, what?
Oh, and y'all, AT is good. AT's got that fire for you in the dojo.
No, I've got like the elder like excuse, if anything. Like,
I don't know, man. I think
I'm
I
in
can.
the senior, not the master. The like senior did it, just the senior.
Sure. Hey, yeah, I think everybody on this podcast, we're classics, but we're not antiques yet, right?
Yeah,
we're from the 1900s.
Oh my gosh, we are.
From the 1900s. But I think what has been so I'm like, this is a great example of a monolithic cultural practice or activity, right? Like Japanese people. Sumo is the mother of like karate and jiu-jitsu, judo, these things. But to see non-Japanese people engage in this in the way that you and JJ have, and I haven't met everyone else, so I'm sure there are other really great examples, but I'm speaking from my experience at Honu, is not just the inclusivity, but the like the respect. The like I was at a tournament, the one in Long Beach, and I saw someone who kind of just like, I have to like do this thing, and didn't really respect the ritual. And I was
bad chirichozu is the thing to watch for, right?
And in Japan, like the intention of what you do matters. And so even when in karate, when we bow and we're competing against our opponent, it's not just like it's like you stop and you give them that moment of like acknowledgement. You're like, I'm gonna beat you, but like I'm gonna respectfully beat you. And like and I think to watch how in practice, where JJ teaches us about stepping into the ring, or before we compete, or before they say go, and just the like practice of it, for me, it feels like it's honoring my ancestors. It's honoring the people before me who this has meant a great deal. And maybe it hasn't always been inclusive, or it hasn't been accessible to people. But I think what is so powerful today is that we're able to take those sacred pieces and incorporate them in ways that everybody can access. And I think this is, if it needs to be written about, or it needs to be like what y'all are doing, like it needs to be studied in a way of like, this isn't cultural appropriation. This isn't, a hijacking of, I think it's how we show to really respect, honor, and then also celebrate and participate and elevate. And like I think that's been a really when I talk about you two, when I talk about what you've done and what you're doing, I'm like, this needs to be studied, because it can happen, right? Like when we think of liberation, and we always think of like these far off dreams or goals of what something can be, but we like sometimes experience them every day in these like small
what does
moments.
good feel like? What does right feel like? Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We've experienced it, right? So we know it
Mhm.
can happen. It may not be across the board in all the states and all the doyos and all the like whatever or overseas, but we have experienced it in these like in these micro spaces. So we know it can happen in the future. We know what we could fight for. So I just like I always think about that and like what are my intentions in my day to day, and I think of like my grandpa, my grandma, like everybody before me, my even my like great grandma and great grandpa who was a jerk to my great grandma when she got off the boat. Like there was still or the sumo in prisons, right? Like where has the resilience come in? Where have we held on to our heritage or to our culture or to the things that are sacred in the midst of? And I think about that, and I don't know what's going to happen in this next year. I'm a trans person, and I'm, myself and my community are terrified. And I often look back in history into where are these moments where, there's a complete ban on, or we're going to kick people out, or we're going to, put people in prison, and we're going to I think it's the resilience, the like, we will find a way because we always have. But that we shouldn't have to, right? Like that's
that
the other
part.
part.
That part. No, what you're saying is real, AT.
I think what y'all have been doing is this podcast, and like these are all things where you're laying the map to freedom in some way, which seems like how is sumo doing that? But we're able to connect those dots just in this 1 hour of conversation of looking back into a San Diego history. So I think what y'all are doing is like radical.
Yeah. Well,
you're so amazing. I love you.
Well, and I'm glad that AT and Jake, you did kind of like connect, the past to the present and what we can try to do here, and how this can serve something bigger, right?
Yeah,
this is just one. I love sumo. I love it. I'm passionate about it. But what I loved, and when I started doing the research, that's been a real emotional roller coaster, is that sense of we need to start recording this stuff, documenting it, compiling it, because
it's
on the one
too
hand,
late, right?
Yeah, on the one hand, I'm seeing how much is there, and I've been able to find, and other people are able to find and point me to, and it's there. And then at the same time, like holding those tensions but at the same time, the Issei are all gone. Almost all the Nisei are gone. And some recorded those stories. But, like Jake, you were talking, well, actually, several of you have been talking about how, when these stories are recorded and hearing these stories, like you can see these interviews sometimes and see like this like focus of the researcher just on this one narrow thing. And it's like, oh, but there's this other rich thing that you're just glossing over, so how do we try to tell this like kind of bigger, broader story? How do we just get it down for posterity? Because, so much of it is gone. So little of it was preserved, in this one narrow thing I'm concerned about, but that's just representative of all these other cultural things, all this other rich life people were living. And, one thing I'm seeing from the pre-World War II, Nikkei sumo stories, is, it's very male dominated. The story is male, with a couple exceptions, and those are cool. We're going to talk about some of, the women's stories in there, but there's so few, and knowing there was more, there had to be more. Like these were families, and so, it's that roller coaster of how much I'm learning, but man, there's so much that's lost already. So how do we bring it up?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that like knowledge for knowledge's sake isn't necessarily something that drives me, but studying the past to understand the present is a big deal.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like any middle-aged white guy, I've studied the Roman Empire. That's just a thing. That's
It's
just
our
a thing that you
disease,
pick
yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that as you get older, it osmoses itself into my brain, right? Like that's just how it works. But part of why that period of time, ancient Rome, is interesting to today is like the Republic became an empire. That can still happen, right? Like that's something to watch out for. That's something to help you understand the present more. Yeah. So like for me, at least, part of the reason that I was so eager to jump into this project is that there's so much. Sumo is very, it's kind of volatile right now. There's like a number of ways that it could go, and it's growing fast enough that it doesn't necessarily have a set narrative.
Nothing's inevitable. Yeah,
exactly. And narrative might not even be the right way to look at the story of modern American amateur sumo. It's all over the place. There's all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
But studying where it came from can only help us understand it better. So yeah, exactly. I'm excited for that. I'm all about it. And I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have dived into this one if I wasn't super interested.
Yeah. I think it's big that we're honoring the past, because once again, JJ's foot lives in his mouth, and I'm really trying not to do that again.
You've done great tonight.
I'm going to, but like that's just a part of it. And honestly,
but also, what are you modeling? We're all gonna we all do it. We all make mistakes, and true. You're showing and you're modeling because you're such a good sensei. Like how to make those corrections, because that's part of the problem, right?
Yeah, yeah. People resort to that, doubling down on being wrong and terrible instead of doubling down on that curiosity.
Yeah, so, and I think that's the right mindset to go into studying history. Yeah.
I'm a JJ stamp for life.
Honestly, we could talk the rest of the night and still be on episode 0.
Second part, JJ love.
Someone has to shut it down, and the guy's taking his foot out of his mouth to shut it down.
Hey, can I give AT one more compliment, because I can see how uncomfortable it makes them when you get compliments. Your hair is on point today. Well done.
Oh,
as a fellow, the only other person on the show with long hair. Yeah, you're doing great.
I got my pony.
Look at Christina.
You got a pony now.
It's going.
AT, I need to come over because I can put mine in a little ponytail now too.
Maybe next time I'll go with maybe I'll go down and you'll see how long my hair is.
I don't think I've seen Jake.
You guys have no idea.
Man.
You can toss.
All right. Thank you everyone that lasted all the way to this point. Just know that we're going to keep getting deeper. The format of it is going to be a little loose. We're still figuring things out, and we're talking about things that really matter to everyone on the show, and that's why we're here. All right? Well,
and one thing I want to say is, as the series goes on, or as we have conversations about this, we want to keep learning. If we're off course, if there's questions we're not asking, if you think we should be asking or looking into more, like I'm open, like I'm curious about this. I'm finding out like each new direction or lead is a wealth of stuff. So, we're open.
All right. Sayonara.
Bye.
I got Wikipedia on my other screen. I finally learned.
Ha!